On this day in 1967, Celtic finally snapped in Montevideo. The outcome of the Intercontinental Championship of 1967 was probably decided by the draw determining the first match being played in Scotland. The aggregate score was irrelevant, and in the not unlikely event of the home team winning each match, that meant a play-off in Uruguay where Racing were bound to have the advantage. Even in the match at Hampden, Racing had the advantage of a Spanish referee. In his biography, A Boy Called Bertie, written with Alex Gordon, Bertie Auld remembered, "For a start, he could converse with them in their native tongue, given that Spanish is, of course, the first language of Argentina. During the game in Glasgow, we could hear him talking to their players, but all we got were shrugs and gestures." Racing had kicked, punched and spat their way through the first two matches, and Celtic expected nothing else in Montevideo. The Evening Times reported on the day of the match, "A grimly determined manager, Jock Stein, and his pool of players gave little thought to the glorious sunshine, rustling palm trees and beautiful beaches of this picturesque city as they planned their tactics for what could be a brutal, bruising encounter. We want to win the title, not so much for ourselves, but to prevent Racing from becoming champions," said Jock Stein. "We can win because we are the better team." He added that Celtic would not look for trouble on the field at the Centenario Stadium, but his players would give as much as they are forced to take in what he expected to be a no-holds-barred match against the tough Argentinians. Celtic had been reasonably happy with Uruguayan referee Esteban Moreno in the second match and requested for him to take charge of the play-off. But the organisers refused and appointed a Paraguayan by the name of Rodolfo Perez Osorio, who was, not to put too fine a point on it, utterly hopeless. Auld remembered, "I think he lost the plot at the toss-up. It was far too big an occasion for an inexperienced referee. I think he was only 29 years old, and he hadn't a clue what was going on around him." Celtic had won praise for their composure in the first two matches and their stoicism in the face of the brutality and thuggery of the Argentinians. But everyone has their limits, and Celtic reached theirs as they watched Racing take turns to assault Jimmy Johnston, while Senor Osorio looked benevolently on. From the 25th minute, after a particularly brutal foul on Johnston, the game degenerated into a kicking match. Unfortunately, for Racing, this kind of approach was second nature, and Celtic had none of their deviousness. 4 Celtic players were sent off, the first being Bobby Lennox, after yet another dreadful foul on Jimmy Johnston. The referee completely lost control as fighting broke out around him, and he sent off a player from each side. Why Bobby Lennox has never been adequately explained. A furious Jock Stein ordered Lennox back onto the pitch, but he was confronted by a policeman with a sword strapped to his hip, who escorted him from the field. Next, Jimmy Johnston, in maybe the greatest injustice of all, was ordered off just before half-time for using his elbow to escape the attentions of a defender. Cardenas scored an almost incidental goal for Racing on 56 minutes as the mayhem continued to unfold, and the most comical sending off occurred on 75 minutes when John Hughes charged at the Racing keeper as he wasted time and inexplicably punched him in the side. As the keeper rolled on the ground, Hughes appeared to kick him as well. An enraged defender rushed to confront him, but thought better of it as Yogi squared up to him and waited for the referee to arrive. After the match, when Jock Stein asked him what he'd been thinking, he said he didn't think anyone was looking. The 4th Celtic player to be sent off didn't leave the pitch. Bertie Auld exacted some retribution on a Racing player and simply refused to leave the pitch. The referee relented and restarted the game with a free kick to Celtic. Just before Hughes' ordering off, the most iconic image of the whole series saw Tommy Gemmell exact revenge on the Racing left-winger Raffo, a serial spitter. He did it once too often during yet another melee, and Big Tam gave him an almighty kick between his legs, an incident BBC Scotland, who hadn't even bothered to send a camera to South America, took great delight in broadcasting repeatedly over the following weeks. The Battle of Montevideo didn't just see Celtic lose the chance to become world champions. They also lost their self-respect, albeit under the most outrageous provocation, and all of the players were fined their £250 bonus for winning the League Cup just before they flew out to South America. This caused a great deal of resentment amongst the players, as it had not been their decision to play a third game. The World Club Championship of 1967 was soon looked back upon with a sense of grim humour, but it was a traumatic experience at the time. The Glasgow Herald wrote on the 6th of November 1967, "Now the future of the World Championship is in doubt. Certainly, after Simpson, the Celtic goalkeeper, had been put out of the second game when he was hit on the head by a missile thrown from the crowd, Mr. Steen said, 'I would not bring a team to South America again for all the money in the world.'"